It didn't collapse in silence. It collapsed in panic. Billions vanished in a matter of hours, evaporating from balance sheets, pension funds, and the pockets of ordinary South Africans who had trusted one name, Steinhoff International. For years, Steinhoff was sold as a miracle, a proudly South African multinational, a global empire of furniture and retail that dared to stand toe-to-toe with IKEA. It was the company that promised jobs, growth, and prestige. And at the center of it all stood one man, Markus Jooste, the polished CEO who lived like a king and insisted that Steinhoff was untouchable. But the numbers that made Jooste look brilliant weren't numbers at all. They were illusions, carefully staged, shuffled between shell companies and false invoices. Paper profits built on sand. The story begins far from Johannesburg, in the small German town of Westerstede in 1964, when a trader named Bruno Steinhoff saw an opportunity to import cheap furniture from Eastern Europe. Over the decades, that modest venture grew into a continent-spanning empire. And when South Africa emerged from apartheid in the 1990s, Steinhoff shifted its base to Johannesburg, hungry to ride the wave of global capital pouring into the newly opened economy. To the public, it was a story of vision and ambition. But to those who would later dig into the books, it was a story of smoke and mirrors. Steinhoff wasn't just a business. It was a performance staged for investors, governments, and the global markets. And the actors were some of the most powerful men in European and South African business circles. The audience didn't realize they weren't watching growth. They were watching the greatest corporate fraud in South African history unfold in real time. This is Ledger of Lies. And this is the story of Steinhoff International, the Enron of South Africa. Scroll 2, Roots of an Empire. Every empire begins with a seed. For Steinhoff, that seed was planted in 1964, not in South Africa, but in the small German town of Westerstede. A young entrepreneur named Bruno Steinhoff began importing cheap furniture from Eastern Europe. His genius was timing. In post-war Europe, millions of families needed affordable furniture, and Bruno's contacts across the Iron Curtain gave him a steady supply. But the real turning point came decades later, when South Africa emerged from the shadow of apartheid in the early 1990s. The nation was open for business. Global investors poured money into Johannesburg, hungry for the promise of growth in Africa's largest economy. And Steinhoff saw an opening. It could reinvent itself, not as a provincial German importer, but as a multinational titan headquartered in South Africa. To a country trying to prove itself on the global stage, Steinhoff was a symbol of ambition. It presented itself as the IKEA of Africa. Sleek showrooms, low prices, and bold promises to democratize home furnishing. In truth, it was hungrier than IKEA ever dared to be. South Africa's timing made it fertile ground. For decades, under apartheid, global capital had been cautious, even boycotting the country outright. Now, the floodgates opened. Local pension funds, desperate to diversify, bought into Steinhoff stock. Banks lined up to finance expansion. And politicians embraced Steinhoff as a model of what the new South Africa could offer: modern, global, competitive. But behind the smiles at ribbon cuttings and the optimism of the Rainbow Nation, Steinhoff's DNA still reflected its roots. It was built not on transparency, but on arbitrage. Buying cheap in one place, selling high in another, exploiting gaps in markets and rules. That mindset would later metastasize into something far more sinister. By the mid-1990s, Steinhoff wasn't just a furniture business. It was a philosophy of endless expansion, forged in the optimism of a newly opened South Africa, and the hunger of global markets looking for the next big bet. The empire had found its stage. Now it needed its star. Enter Markus Jooste. Scroll 3. The rise of Markus Jooste. Every empire needs a face. For Steinhoff, that face was Markus Jooste, the man who turned furniture into fortune and trust into tragedy. Jooste wasn't born into wealth. He came from small-town South Africa, a product of modest beginnings in the Eastern Cape. But what he lacked in privilege, he made up for in ambition and charm. With a degree in accounting and a sharp mind for numbers, he quickly proved he could do more than balance books, he could bend them to his will. He joined Steinhoff in the 1980s, and by the time Bruno Steinhoff shifted the company's center of gravity to Johannesburg, Jooste was already being hailed as a visionary. He spoke the language of investors fluent in growth, efficiency, and opportunity, and to the South African public. He embodied a new kind of success story, a local boy who could stand shoulder to shoulder with Europe's business elite. Jooste cultivated an image of quiet sophistication. He wasn't loud or brash. Instead, he was smooth, a gentleman executive with a soft-spoken confidence that inspired trust. Yet behind the calm demeanor, he lived lavishly. Thoroughbred racehorses, seaside mansions, golf, estates, and luxury cars. His social circle was filled with politicians, bankers, and the old Afrikaner elite, the kind of company that made him seem untouchable. To shareholders, he was a financial alchemist. Under his leadership, Steinhoff's balance sheets gleamed with rising profits and aggressive expansion. Each new acquisition, whether a furniture chain in Europe or a retailer in America, was spun as proof of Jooste's genius. Analysts hailed him as a deal-maker extraordinaire, someone who could turn struggling companies into gold. But few noticed that the gold dust in his hands was just that, dust. Behind closed doors, Jooste pushed a culture of relentless growth, pressuring executives to deliver results that matched his vision, even when the numbers didn't add up. Deals became more complex, the books more opaque. Steinhoff's web of subsidiaries stretched across continents, each one masking the weaknesses of another. And yet, year after year, the reports sparkled and the markets applauded. He had mastered the art of illusion, a magician in a tailored suit, conjuring profits out of thin air. And like all great magicians, Jooste understood one rule: keep their eyes on the performance, not on the trick. By the early 2010s, Steinhoff's stock soared. Pension funds loaded up, investment houses lined up, and the Johannesburg Stock Exchange celebrated its global champion. Markus Jooste became a national hero, a man who could do no wrong. But in the shadows, the ledgers were already beginning to whisper the truth. Scroll 4, an empire of acquisitions. By the early 2010s, Markus Jooste had transformed Steinhoff from a regional furniture chain into a global empire. At least, that's what the headlines said. Behind the curtain, every expansion was another layer of smoke. Jooste's empire grew not through innovation, but through relentless acquisition. He devoured companies across continents: Conforama in France, Poco in Germany, Poundland in the UK, and even Mattress Firm in the United States. Each deal was spun as a masterstroke, proof that Steinhoff could compete with giants like IKEA and Walmart. But few asked the obvious question: how could one company afford to swallow so many others so fast? The answer lay in complex financing, intercompany loans, and creative accounting, a tangled web of subsidiaries designed to inflate profits and hide debts. Every acquisition became a chance to move money, record imaginary revenues, and impress investors with glossy numbers. In South Africa, Jooste was hailed as a national hero, the man who had built a global African champion. Analysts praised his visionary leadership, calling Steinhoff a model of modern capitalism. The media gushed over his boldness. Bankers called him a genius. Politicians toasted his success. But inside the empire, executives whispered concerns. The deals didn't make sense. Many of the acquired companies were struggling or overvalued. And yet, every quarter, Steinhoff reported soaring profits. Profits that existed only on paper. The expansion frenzy created the illusion of strength. But in truth, it was a house of cards built on borrowed money and fake margins. Each new acquisition was like adding a floor to a tower already shaking in the wind. And Jooste, obsessed with keeping the illusion alive, refused to slow down. To investors, Steinhoff's global map looked unstoppable, a corporate empire stretching from Cape Town to London to New York. But the truth was buried deep in offshore accounts, shell companies, and phony transactions designed to hide losses. The empire was vast, but it was hollow. And soon, the first cracks would begin to show. Scroll 5, the crack in the ledger. For years, Steinhoff's success story gleamed with the sheen of inevitability. Every quarter brought record profits. Every acquisition was hailed as a triumph. Investors, auditors, and even governments applauded Markus Jooste's empire as a shining example of global ambition. But beneath the surface, the numbers were beginning to rot. By 2015, murmurs had begun to circulate, first in quiet corners of Frankfurt and Stellenbosch, then across trading floors and financial pages. Something in Steinhoff's books didn't make sense. Revenue soared, but cash flow lagged. Subsidiaries traded with each other in circular transactions, reporting profits on deals that never left the company. The ledger was starting to whisper, and what it whispered was fraud. That same year, German prosecutors launched an investigation raiding Steinhoff's offices and scrutinizing their complex web of European subsidiaries. Regulators suspected fictitious profits and sham deals transactions created not to move furniture, but to move numbers. Inside the company, Deloitte, Steinhoff's longtime auditor, began flagging irregularities. They found intercompany loans with no clear business purpose and revenues inflated through shell entities that looked suspiciously like Jooste's private playthings. Still, Jooste played the part of the composed visionary. He reassured the board, charmed investors, and smoothed over auditors' concerns with promises that everything would be reconciled. And for a while, the illusion held, because it had to. But as the empire grew, so did the cracks. By 2017, those whispers turned into shouts. Journalists across Europe began questioning how a South African retailer could afford such an aggressive buying spree. Analysts noted Steinhoff's ballooning debt and curious accounting maneuvers. In the corridors of Deloitte, the mood shifted from concern to alarm. When the time came to approve Steinhoff's annual financial statements, Deloitte refused. They would not sign off on books riddled with unanswered questions. That refusal was the final domino. Without the auditor's stamp, the illusion shattered. Investors demanded answers. Regulators pressed harder. The board convened emergency meetings. German prosecutors accelerated their probe. Jooste could no longer delay. On December 5, 2017, Steinhoff released a statement that stunned the world. Steinhoff has today advised its shareholders that new information has come to light, which relates to accounting irregularities requiring further investigation. In a single sentence, the empire admitted the truth, though only the smallest sliver of it. The market reacted instantly. Steinhoff's stock collapsed by over 90% within days. Billions in value were obliterated. Pension funds, savings, and national pride evaporated overnight. Ordinary South Africans, whose retirements were tied to Steinhoff shares, watched their futures vanish. Behind the headlines, Markus Jooste resigned, leaving a smouldering crater in his wake. The board called in PricewaterhouseCoopers to conduct a full forensic investigation. The results would later reveal $6.5 billion, approximately $7.6 billion in fictitious transactions. A decade of deceit. Steinhoff's confession wasn't an act of integrity. It was an act of survival, the last gasp of a company cornered by its own lies. The magician's trick had been exposed. The applause turned to outrage, and the empire began to crumble. Scroll 6, the puppet masters. Markus Jooste didn't act alone. Behind the scenes was a tight circle, hand-picked insiders who approved phony deals, forged documents, and papered over the rot with stunning precision. Among them was Ben Lagrange, Steinhoff's former CFO, who claimed ignorance but had signed off on key transactions. Investigators unearthed a tangled web of shell companies, like Campion Capital and Talgarth Group, controlled by Jooste's cronies. Fake revenue flowed in from entities that were technically separate but secretly orchestrated by the same people. It was corporate ventriloquism. The illusion worked for years because the puppets were clapping for their own show. Scroll 7, the clock strikes. Everything unraveled in December 2017. Just days before Steinhoff's annual results were due, the company abruptly delayed publication. Investors panicked. Then came the nuclear headline: Jooste had resigned. In a leaked letter, he warned of accounting irregularities but gave no details. The market smelled blood. Steinhoff's share price plunged 90% within days, wiping out over $12 billion in market value. Pension funds, banks, and small investors were crushed. Germany launched a criminal probe. The dream was over, and the nightmare had begun. Scroll 8. The Reckoning. In the aftermath, forensic audits revealed $7.4 billion in fictitious revenue, an accounting fraud on a scale Europe hadn't seen since Enron. Deloitte, Steinhoff's longtime auditor, claimed they'd been misled. Law firms circled like vultures. Lawsuits piled up from investors and regulators across 3 continents. Jooste, once hailed as a retail king, vanished from public view. He refused to testify before Parliament. In 2023, just days before he was set to be arrested, Jooste took his own life with a gunshot to the chest. No trial, no confession, only unanswered questions and broken lives. Scroll 9. The illusion shattered. Steinhoff still exists, barely. A corporate shell burdened by lawsuits and debt. What began as a modest furniture store in rural Stellenbosch became a $20 billion house of cards built on forged invoices, circular deals, and unchecked ambition. But Steinhoff isn't just a South African tragedy. It's a warning, a reminder that beneath every soaring empire, there may be a trapdoor. And sometimes, it's the man smiling at the top who is holding the key. This is Ledger of Lies.